And we're back with Collector vs. Wild, the show where we combat our cares with nostalgia and the joy of gaming. This week I'm bringing you over 20 games ranging from the NES all the way to the PlayStation 4. With that in mind, don't forget to follow me, Bryant Chambers, over on Twitch, and comment below with which of these games you'd like to see me stream in the future. With all the formalities out of the way, let's get Oscar Mike. Metroid. For over 30 years, this game has held the #1 slot in my favorite games of all time list. And even though several newer games have been contending for that seat in recent years, today I want to focus on just how much I love this game. You see, every year I try to complete Metroid at least once. And I love this game quite a bit more than even Super Metroid or a lot of the sequels. In fact, I haven't even played through the Metroid Prime series because I think when it went 3D, it lost some of what makes Metroid completely awesome. And you can see from the footage in this video that I'm able to move quickly through the early stages of the game just from memory. I've literally played this game that much. There's something about the exploration, the discovery, and the building of a character that just hits me right in the core of my soul. It talks to me as a person. And very few games from past to present are able to do this as well as Metroid does. And that's why I think, honestly, it's been able to hold this slot for so long, because many games have tried to emulate what Metroid does, whether it's an RPG or whether it's a Castlevania game, but they just didn't quite hit as hard as Metroid hit me as a child. Now, I will admit, in modern times, there are games that have improved upon the Metroid formula. You know, one day we'll cover Axiom Verge, which is one of the games that's contending for that #1 slot because it's a better Metroid than Metroid is. You know, thinking back into my childhood, how did I ever finish this game without a map, right? Things like that. Modern improvements have certainly taken the formula and made it better, but there's just still something about this game, this experience, that's made it my #1 favorite game of all time, and it's influenced every single game I love up to today, right? I love exploration. I love discovery. I love leveling up. Those are things that I love doing in all of my gaming experiences. And honestly, they're things that I love doing in my real life. You know, I train very hard physically to level up my body. I read and listen to smart people constantly to level up my brain. Right? I love going on adventures to the farm with my family. These are things like when you hear Miyamoto talk about why he created Zelda, a lot of those similar personality traits are in me, and it's why I love games like Metroid, right? It's why I have so many fond memories of working with a band of brothers in and out of a combat situation. It's a grand adventure, despite what challenges you run into there. So I can't say enough good about Metroid. I can't really express how much I love this game in words. I'm just gonna leave it there. So if my best friend from growing up is watching this, he's laughing hysterically as I show you my still working original NES. His running joke is that I'm very hard on electronics and pretty much break everything I touch. And there is some truth to that. Now my kids have kind of taken over that role in my life. But somehow, Old Faithful here has survived. It could probably use a new 72-pin install, but it still kicks pretty well. In fact, I think that 72-pin issue contributed to why the NES games I'm showing you on this video are not quite as crisp as they could be. Chalk that up to the Nintendo, not to the games, especially for one of the games I'm getting ready to show you here in a couple of minutes. But even still, I'm looking forward to eventually buying the analog NT so that I can get a much cleaner signal for playing and capturing games in the future. But I'm elated that this original NES still works, that it still kicks, that it still plays games, and that it's such a wonderful nostalgic experience every time I fire it back up, and that they've made modern technology that allows me to hook it up to the monitors that I have here. In fact, I do actually have 2 CRT TVs that you can't see here in my office setup that I have played the games on when I'm just playing and not recording. It's such a good time. I have so many good memories from this, playing this console as a kid. And I'm really trying to rack my brain to figure out, was the NES my favorite gaming experience? Should those honors now transfer to the Xbox 360, the machine that got me back into playing games after a long hiatus? Or maybe even the PlayStation 4, where I've had some of the greatest gaming experiences in recent history. So NES is still kind of holding that title, even more so than the Super Nintendo, because that came along as I started to get older as a kid and started getting interested in sports and girls. But yeah, can't say enough good things about this machine. I'm beyond overjoyed that it still works. Next, we have Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots Limited Edition on the PlayStation 3. For the last few years, I've been entertaining the idea that Hideo Kojima may be responsible for all the things I hate about modern games. The heavy focus on stories that take themselves too seriously and at the expense of fluid gameplay that's actually fun, control schemes from the PS2 era still showing up in PS4 games, looking at you, Metal Gear Solid 5, failed filmmakers trying to ham-fist their movies into video games. Now, having said all that, you may be wondering why I added Guns of the Patriots to my collection at all. And it's simple. I made a promise to a friend. I encourage you to stick around to watch the last game I discuss on this show, as I'll discuss how Hideo Kojima also made one of my most favorite games of all time. In fact, going back to the Metroid discussion, a game that Hideo Kojima made is holding the number 2 slot behind Metroid. And in fact, for years, I've argued in my brain whether it should be the Hideo Kojima game or Metroid in that number 1 slot. Like, it's that good. But after finishing Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, I told a friend of mine how much I love Naked Snake's character, even though I thought the gameplay was mostly trash. Okay? I could relate to Naked Snake, who becomes Big Boss, given what happened to him in Snake Eater. And I'm not going to spoil any of that story for you. If you can get through the clumsy gameplay that Kojima games have back in the PS2 era, I highly recommend you play Snake Eater, or at the very least, watch a Let's Play of it, or watch like a 20-minute video where they break down basically the movie. Because as much as I criticize Kojima, you'll see here in a second, I also want to give him some praise. Right? But my friend, a fellow military vet, when he was listening to that story, made me promise that I'd play Guns of the Patriots, no matter how much I hate Metal Gear Solid's gameplay. He said my emotional reaction to the story would be worth it. And that's huge, because I have been very, very negative on Metal Gear Solid's gameplay for years. And that's one area that I'll give Kojima credit. He may be responsible for a lot of what I hate about modern games, but that's because the people who emulate him are nowhere near as good as him at what he does. The storyline is crazily interesting. Even though it's badass crazy, it's still very interesting. So when I criticize him for, hey, you're responsible for all these things I hate in games, understand the caveat there is, yeah, he's responsible for it. But when he does it, he's actually awesome at it. He does a lot of things that I don't like so well that I've been willing to play all of his games. In fact, the only one I've ever quit is Metal Gear Solid 5. I couldn't take it. But here's to hoping that Guns of the Patriots delivers. Next, we have Twin Eagle Brother Joe Revenge. I have no idea what Brother Joe Revenge is about, but if you're new around here, you're probably not aware that spaceship shooters are one of my top 3 favorite video game genres of all time. I can't get enough of them. Unfortunately, not all shooters are made equal. Twin Eagle just doesn't hold up when you have games like Life Force, Musha, or the Raiden series available to play. Even still, I'm considering going for a complete collection of NES games after I've collected all the other stuff I care about, so nabbing Twin Eagle may have been a good move given how rare it is to find in the wild. Next, we have Arcania, the complete tale on the PlayStation 4. Arcania was originally called Gothic 4 back when it was originally released on the Xbox 360 and PC. Since it was developed by Black Forest Games and not Piranha Bytes, that name was eventually changed when the re-releases started to happen. Not to mention, the Gothic fan base got their panties all in a bunch because Arcania was not as quote-unquote good as other Gothic games. And I do agree with that. I'm not in disagreement with the Gothic fan base. And call it what you want, but I really liked Arcania. I really, really did. Now, my favorite Gothic game is Gothic 3, which I know in the Gothic community is sacrilege because 2 is the best thing that ever happened. Fine, that's great. I still like 3 the best out of the first 3 games. And yes, I admit that even Gothic 3, with all of its flaws and the fact that it is a broken mess until you install mods, it's a better game than Arcania. It is, technically. But that doesn't mean I have to hate Arcania just because it didn't live up to its namesake. Right? If you dig these quasi-open world RPGs, I would definitely add this one to your collection, especially because now you can get it for like $10 at the time of this recording. It's ridiculous, right? And yeah, it's not as open as the Gothic series, right? The story is by no means as well put together as some of those games, and the options those games give you, and the difficulty that those games introduce is quite a bit harder than Arcania. But Arcania, for what it is still a very enjoyable game if you like these quasi-open world RPGs. Like I said, I highly recommend it if you liked games like Risen, and even if you liked Gothic. Right, but if you're in the Gothic zealot camp where anything that tries to emulate it you're going to hate, then don't. But if you like games like Two Worlds, if you like games like Gothic, I think Arcania is a logical next step. Next, we've got Bayonetta 1 and 2 on the Wii U. I actually copped this game at the recommendation of Metal Jesus Rock, so appreciate that, Jason. Thanks for the recommendation. And it's about what I've come to expect from Platinum Games. I don't know if I'm dying to clear this one off my backlog, but I will get to it eventually. Plus, I made a promise to myself after I played a game that we'll talk about on another show, that I was going to buy every Platinum Games game ever made. Right? I think only one of their games ended up getting a bad review, and I think it was like a port of a Star Fox game or whatever. I'll still get it. I will still get it because Platinum Games really delivers. So Bayonetta 1 and 2 seem to be right in the vein of what I like. It's got a little bit of Devil May Cry to it, which is fine. I think that's cool. And so far, so good. I'm looking forward to eventually getting to this game. I don't think I'm going to make it a priority to focus on it. But eventually, I probably will clear it off my backlog. And I really appreciate Metal Jesus for the rec. And surprise, surprise. Next up, we have Grand Theft Auto 3 for the PlayStation 2. Now, I've been talking about how much I hate Rockstar games since first playing LA Noire years ago. And like my friend that runs my local GameStop said, Rockstar games control like pushing a refrigerator that has another refrigerator on top of it. And I couldn't have said it better myself. And believe me, I've tried to say it better myself. I just think Rockstar could not create a control scheme that doesn't feel like you're running on ice skates to save their lives. But I wanted to go back to Grand Theft Auto 3 to see if the game that started this whole hype train was somehow maybe different from these newer ones. And to my pleasant surprise, I didn't completely hate the 20 minutes or so I spent playing GTA 3 to capture this footage. The story is minimal and it's much more play focused. I liked that. I really, really did. And the controls are clumsy because it's a much older game, but not as weirdly running on ice as the newer games are. So here's to hoping that I can enjoy the entire experience, and maybe, just maybe, we'll have the very first Rockstar game that I don't hate. Here's a new game from Mega Cat Studios called Almost Hero for the NES. Fun fact, I met the owner of Mega Cat Studios a few years ago when he was looking for some help marketing his products and growing his business. And one of my recommendations was to get his new age retro games in the local video game retailer in my area, eStarland, since they were one of the biggest known brands online as well. And I was beyond excited when I saw Almost Hero chilling at the store one Saturday when I took my kids there to hang out. I grabbed a copy immediately, and I'm just now getting around to playing it. And if I had to describe this game, it's like Double Dragon meets River City Ransom. Keep in mind that the jankiness you're seeing on screen is being caused by my NES and its upscaler, and not the game. The game is just fine. The visual issues you're seeing here are on my end. But I am looking forward to playing this game because one of the other of my favorite 3 genres of games are beat 'em ups. So very much looking forward to getting back into this one and finishing it eventually. Next, we have Crimson Skies High Road to Revenge for the original Xbox. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Crimson Skies, so I'm very excited to finally be playing it. Funny story, I bought the Xbox that came with this game and never played it back in those days. I don't think I even fired it up once. But so far, I'm enjoying the game. but I am noticing just how much control schemes have evolved in modern games. You'll see me taking forever to beat the enemies here in this first dogfight because I'm struggling to force my brain to accept that the right analog stick does not control pitch, but it does control the rolls. Either way, I am looking forward to playing this game for real and finishing it, getting it off my backlog, and seeing if it really is as amazing as recommended. Next, we have The Division 2 for the PlayStation 4. Now, remember when I said in a previous video that I hate most Ubisoft games? The Division 2 was, and I stress was, a prime example. I bought this game after loving Ghost Recon Wildlands, hoping to get some of that more tactical shooting joy. What I was treated to was bullet sponge enemies that didn't die even after I blasted them in the mouth with a shotgun at point blank range. The looter shooter craze that people seem to love so much is kind of lost on me. But playing this game again for this show, there are elements that I really do enjoy. This whole sequence of me fighting my way through this base that you're watching on screen was really, really satisfying. And I think to enjoy a game like this, I really have to control my expectations and just play it for what it is, accept the fact that there's bullet sponge enemies. They're not going to die when you shoot them in the head the first time, a lot of times, which I think is ridiculous. But if I can just put that on the shelf and enjoy this game for what it is, which is a quasi open world looter shooter. I wouldn't really call this game a role-playing game necessarily, because I don't think you play this game with the intent to play a role. And the story is absolutely ridiculous. But the gameplay, one of the things Ubisoft is really good at is making gameplay loops that really keep the player like, I have wanted to come back and play this game more and more. It's the same thing I went through when I played Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Although I ultimately think that game is trash for the, the shady pay-to-win mechanics that Ubisoft built into that game, I couldn't argue that the gameplay loop was highly addictive. So I'm really looking forward. I'm actually going to finish this game. I don't think I'll platinum it. I think there's probably going to be too many things in it that would typically annoy me to get a platinum trophy, but somehow The Division 2, after the first couple hours and I got past the immediate shock of how the game plays, I'm starting to enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to finishing it. Risen for the Xbox 360. I don't care how technically challenged this game is. I also don't care that the story is weak. I love Risen. It's one of my favorite games from the Xbox 360 era, hands down. The exploration, the discovery, the character building, I love it all. Is it flawed? Yes. Are there other games that do it better? Yes. Is Gothic 3 better than Risen? Yes. Piranha Bytes, though, just seems to know how to push my gaming buttons in all the right ways. Despite all the flaws, the non-existent story, right? The boring character interactions. I somehow just don't care. I love going into the world and finding all of the hidden treasures that are all over the map, right? From curative plants that you need to make potions to finding weapons in a cave that's off the beaten path that you really have to go looking for to even find that cave. And there's no map with pointers on it saying, hey, there's a cave here you should probably check out. It's just you have to be willing to explore. And this game, better than most games, I think Piranha Bytes is very good at developing exploration and discovery into their games. They're one of the best at it. And I'm looking forward to playing through this game again to re-get all the achievements I lost when Microsoft, locked me out of my account. So here's to Risen. Highly recommended if you haven't played this. If you want a better version of it, for sure play it on the PC if you're a PC gamer. But I'm an old person. I don't care about frame rates and all that jazz. I think it's fine the way it is. Definitely give it a look if you like these types of games. Next, we have Rune Factory 4 on the 3DS. This is a fun, if peculiar, gaming experience. Like I said last week, farming sims are fun in small bursts. What helps Rune Factory 4 is that it mixes in the adventure-driven gameplay. Now, I've struggled a bit to stay focused with this game, but I do hope to finish it in the not-too-distant future. I will say that one of its drawbacks is that it has a very heavy focus on what I believe they tried to create as a whimsical story, and it doesn't fail at it. I'm just not interested in it, I think because I'm older than 9, right? I just feel like the story, and if you're a kid at heart who loves those kind of Winnie the Pooh stories and you get hyped for that, even if you're an adult, that's cool. You'll love this. For me, it's cute, but I'd rather just go into the caves and kill the dragons. I'm not interested in the talking dragon you know, the good talking dragon, even though it is kind of, I will admit that it is humorous, right? It is well done, just not my jam. But I do hope that I will be able to get this one off my backlog here in the near future. Next, we have Nier for the Xbox 360. Now, at the beginning of this video, I told you that Metroid was my favorite game of all time and that there were modern games that were competing for that seat. Nier Automata is one of the 3 games in the running that may eventually unseat Metroid as my favorite game of all time. So I'm beyond excited to have Nier back in my collection after platinuming Nier Automata. This is a game that I always regretted not finishing before the big purge of 2013, where I traded almost all of my gaming collection I sent to Amazon to sell it because I was pretty much done. I felt like I was done playing video games. Fortunately, some stuff came out during the PS4 era that got me back into it again. It was like another renaissance. But I never got to finish Nier, even though I liked it quite a bit. And I honestly don't remember exactly what pulled me away. It probably was I was in a dungeon and there was a puzzle, and that usually makes me angry. But this time around, I will finish this game. I already love the hour or so I've put into it, and I just love the atmosphere that this game oozes as you play it. Plus, I'm a sucker for video games that have amazing soundtracks, and the Nier series has amazing soundtracks. In fact, I think this one may be even better than Nier Automata, which was already amazing. So I'm looking forward to getting back into this game, getting back to where I left off, because I'm not quite there, and just enjoying the adventure. This is a series that does so many things right, and I really want to give it the respect it deserves. I can't recommend this game enough. In fact, going back to Metal Jesus' recommendations, he actually recommended this as a hidden gem for the PlayStation 3. Back when he was doing his hidden gems videos, and I 100% agree with him, although, you know, I much prefer Xbox 360 to PlayStation 3 for almost everything. And I cannot recommend this game enough. Give it a shot if you're looking for something cool to play. Next, we have Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance on the Xbox 360. Now, speaking of Nier Automata, as I said earlier, I've taken a strong liking to Platinum games. In fact, I love Nier Automata so much, it was the game that actually made me decide that I'm going to buy every Platinum game that Platinum ever makes or has ever made. And that brings us to Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. It's badass crazy, just like all of Kojima's other ideas, and probably even more so than other games he's made. And he didn't make this one. He's, you know, the mastermind behind it, but Platinum was the developer. But I like what I've played so far. The Platinum DNA is definitely there. And I remember I owned this game back in the day. This is another one of those games that went with the great purge of 2013. And I didn't like this gaming experience the first time I played it. And in fact, I remember I made some YouTube videos about it, and friends of mine that saw the videos were like, yeah, you clearly didn't grow up playing Devil May Cry games because you suck. I was like, yeah, I do suck, and I don't know how to not suck. But somehow this time around, I seem to do okay. It was so compelling to play it that I was just grabbing footage, but then I kept like, oh, let's see what happens next. Oh, I kept getting to boss fight after boss fight because I didn't want to put it down. I just kept playing it, kept playing. So here's to hoping that compulsion to play is that strong throughout the entire experience as I work to knock this off the backlog. And that brings us to Vanquish for the Xbox 360. Yet another Platinum game I picked up not too long ago. In this case, I heard Mark Busler from Classic Game Room talk about how much he loved the game. So it was an immediate pickup for me because he and I have a lot of similar sensibilities when it comes to video games, that we think most video games are too long, that they're not fun enough, that they focus way too much on exposition and storytelling and not enough on giving me an experience that's fun to play. So when he hyped this one, I was like immediately like, yep, because I had avoided this game for years. Like, it looks stupid. I will say that there are other Platinum games I've played that have a much stronger first impression than Vanquish does. Like, so far I could do without the story. There's a bit too much of it, but the gameplay is spot on and it's dope. And this is one that will probably sit a little bit further back in the backlog for now, but I'll get to it eventually and try to finish it and maybe even get all the achievements associated with it. Next, we have The Great Half-Life for the PlayStation 2. My first Half-Life experience was with the orange box on the Xbox 360 back in the day. After not really loving that experience, except for Portal, I thought that game was super dope. I was never really all that motivated to jump into Half-Life. But then I saw Danny O'Dwyer's Escape from Mount Stupid, which was the evolution of his show, The Bluffer's Guide, back when he worked at GameSpot. about Half-Life, and I decided, oh, maybe I should play this game. I really like the way he broke it down. Admittedly, I should probably play the PC version before judging, but when I saw this was on the PS2, which I didn't even know, I wanted to add it to my collection because I'm like, that game's going to eventually become rare, or it's eventually going to become collectible, whether it's rare or not. So far, this game moves pretty slow compared to other shooters I'm used to. It's clearly focused on shoving a story down the player's throat in the beginning, and the loading screens are horrendous. But it surprisingly controls fairly well and managed to keep me curious about what's going to happen next. So I look forward to getting deeper into this game down the road. I really do. I think I may even like this better than Half-Life 2. We'll see. Next, we have The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition for the PlayStation 4. Now, when I reviewed The Witcher 3 back when it first came out, I went on the record and said that it was the best RPG I had ever played. Now, it's not my favorite RPG of all time due to a very specific fatal flaw, but at the time of the review, I couldn't think of another RPG that was this good all around. Now, if you're curious about the fatal flaw, it's the leveling system design. The game is designed to hinder you from getting good experience through combat. You therefore only get good XP from completing storyline quests. I love exploration, discovery, and leveling in RPGs. That's why I play them. That's what I go to that experience for, is to make a godlike warrior and find treasure out in a world that I like exploring. When a game is designed such that I can't really get good experience points while exploring and finding treasure, I feel cheated. It's like, why would I even fight this giant Cyclops if it's only going to give me 20 experience points? Now, it should say something for the game that I also bought it on PC so that I could mod the leveling system. I really did enjoy it that much. I'm looking forward to going back and finally platinuming The Witcher 3 and all the DLC. I've already done the hardest part, which is beating the game on the hardest difficulty. And keep in mind that the edition I'm showing here, if you already own The Witcher 3, is recognized as a separate game with separate trophies than the original Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And so keep that in mind. If you already have The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, you may just be better off buying the DLC, which I think is on sale for Cyber Monday at the time of this recording, versus buying the Complete Edition, because when you install the Complete Edition, it's going to give you a whole new set of trophies, and it's a whole separate game, which I thought was kind of ridiculous, but I don't know how programming trophies work, so maybe that's just the way it had to be. Just bear that in mind if you're thinking about getting the Complete Edition. I deleted the Complete Edition immediately after figuring that out and just went and bought the DLCs. I don't have to, because I don't want to go through the entire Witcher 3 game again on the hardest difficulty. That was a slog. Anyway, great game. Really love it. Wish it could have fixed the fatal flaw. It would have been my favorite RPG of all time easily, but it didn't. So here we are. Next, we have Draken, the Ancient's Gates for the PlayStation 2. I used to own this game back in the day before, again, the big gaming purge of 2013, but I didn't get that far into it. And I've always kind of behind the scenes wanted to come back and play it again because it's got that it factor that I looked for in games that I really enjoy. But now I'm glad I finally have the chance to go back to this. So far, despite the fact that this game clearly shows its age, I think it's going to be fun to play through. I'm looking forward to finishing this and knocking it off the backlog. Give it a shot if you're into these kind of open world adventure games. Next, we have Sega Superstars Tennis for the Xbox 360. What can I say? I love tennis games ever since my first experience with them on my old school brick white and gray Game Boy. And now I get to play one with colorful arenas, dope Sega music, and with characters who I only like in games where they are racing or playing sports. If you like tennis games, I will say that this one's not the best of the tennis games I've played, but with all the additional features and the Sonic characters and the color and the music, I think it's definitely a fun experience. Give it a shot if you're into video game tennis. Next, we have Enslaved, Odyssey to the West for the Xbox 360. If there's one thing I noticed right away about this game, it's that we need to really appreciate the simple upgrades that go unnoticed every console generation. For years, we've been hearing that the PS4 and Xbox One were not huge leaps in terms of game quality and visual fidelity. But looking at these older games, I can tell you for sure that the visuals are noticeable. What's even more noticeable is how much developers in this current generation have stepped up their skills in creating games that have way tighter controls in 3D space. Slippery controls aside, I did dig the short time I spent with Enslaved, and I'm looking forward to getting back into it once my backlog gets a little bit lighter. Next, we have Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria for the PlayStation 2. A good friend of the show named Brain Juice has been screaming at me to play this game for years. He and I both share a very strong love for the Star Ocean series and think that Tri-Ace doesn't get the respect it deserves as a Japanese game developer. So far, this game is very reminiscent of PS2 era RPGs, an era that's one of my least favorites for the genre. It's definitely a strange game, but I often like strange. And I knew a bit about what to expect since I beat the first game in this series about 10 years ago. First impressions didn't blow me away, but I knew that. I didn't love the original Valkyrie profile. I thought it was okay. But I am curious to see how the game unfolds. It's very interesting. The story's a little bit slow moving, like actually technically slow moving with some of the cutscenes. They pause before they start talking, which is really, really weird. But the story is very interesting to find out, is it basically a story about a woman who has schizophrenia or is there something else going on? Like, honestly, I'm kidding about that, but I'm also very serious. Like, it creates a very compelling, like, what is really going on with this woman in this game? So looking forward, again, once my backlog gets a little bit lighter, I'll eventually get around to finishing this game. All right, next we have Metal Gear Solid, the HD collection for the Xbox 360. Now, here is where my hypocrisy starts to kick in. I mentioned earlier that Kojima-san is quite possibly responsible for many of the game design practices that I hate in modern games, but he's also responsible for making my current second favorite video game of all time, the original Metal Gear. I love that game with a passion, despite all the reasons I've been told that it sucks and it's obtuse, and that I should also not hate Zelda. I get it, you're all correct. But for whatever reason, I love the original Metal Gear, and I'm very excited to own this HD collection again because it has Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake on it, a game that I've only dabbled in. I've never gotten around to finishing that game, and I've always regretted that. So I'm so glad that, this is another game that went out with the Great Purge of 2013. I used to own it back in the day. And I'm just beyond excited to play Metal Gear Solid 2 to see if I like it even better than the first. And if I do, how do I adjust my top 10 games of all time? It's like, if Metal Gear Solid 2 is better than Metal Gear, like, does that just bump Metal Gear down one, or do I have to take it off the list? Because there's a lot of other games fighting to get on this list, because I've played a lot of great games in modern times here. But either way, beyond excited to finish this. I don't know if I'll play the other games in the collection because I've finished those, and I'm content to let those stay in my past. But really excited to see if Metal Gear Solid 2 is better than the original. All right, friends, we are just scraping the tip of the iceberg when it comes to my collection here on Collector vs. Wild. Next week, we're going to cover 7 PlayStation 4 games in my collection that are way better than you've heard. Okay, games that you probably skipped because you heard they sucked or you heard they were mediocre, and they're way better than you've heard, and I don't want you to miss out on them. So be sure to tune into that. Be sure to subscribe here to the YouTube channel. We're going to try to drop one of these every week. I'm sorry this one was late. I've been sick, and you could probably still hear it in my voice. Be sure to follow me on Twitch, Bryant Chambers, first name, last name. Get over there on Twitch and follow me, and in the comments below, let me know which of these games you'd like to see me stream, even if it is Metal Gear Solid 2, my most hated Metal Gear Solid game. If that's what you want to see stream and everybody votes for it, I'll probably play it. Anyway, friends, till next time, till all are one, remember to be excellent to each other. I love you dearly. We are stronger than I, and I'll see you on the next one.